Welcome to NBA Jam Tatman QC on Fire Edition. Boom shakalaka!
Happy little games. Hello everybody, Patman QC here, and I am so glad that I was able to scratch that nostalgic itch when it came to my latest video, the history of the Sega Master System. In that video, I took a look at around 10 or so games, but today, I'm going to take a look at some of the best and some of the worst offerings on Sega's 3rd generation 8-bit machine. So once again, kick back, grab some popcorn or maybe a Jolly Rancher as we take a look at some of the best and the worst games on the Sega Master System. The game I completely forgot about, which is quite surprising because I just did a video on it a few months back, is Rastan. The title was one of my favorites in the arcade, especially for the iconic music. This is another game that shines with FM sound, and surprisingly, this is the only home console release we received of the original arcade game. Yes, we did have the various home computer ports, with some of them turning out really good, such as the Apple II GS version, but we only received the follow-up Rastan Saga 2 for the Sega Genesis and TurboGrafx. In the Master System version, the character sprites have been shrunk down just a bit, but everything from the arcade has been transferred over. The graphics are nicely detailed with fairly smooth animation. The level layouts are pretty similar to the arcade original, and then we have the music. While the original PSG sound is pretty good, the FM audio is excellent. It controls really good, and with 2 buttons at your disposal, the game feels like its arcade big brother. One game that deserves special mention is Phantasy Star. This came out 2 days after the release of the original Final Fantasy on the Famicom, and at the time, it was the most expensive game due to its large 4 megabit chip and save battery. Speaking of, this was the very first 4 megabit cartridge on the system. The storyline revolves around Alice as she goes on a journey to defeat the evil king who murdered her brother. This was one of the best role-playing games at the time due to its innovative gameplay as well as its immersive story. The development team wanted to create a unique RPG experience, so they added things such as 3D dungeon crawling along with excellent graphics and animation. A female protagonist was also included, helping this title stand out from all the rest. The graphics were very good with 3 different viewpoints, including a third-person overhead view, as well as the aforementioned first-person viewpoint. In Japan, the game utilized the FM sound module, which makes for an exceptional soundtrack that much more spectacular. If you've never played this game before and are a fan of RPGs, you should definitely check it out. When it comes to classic arcade shoot-'em-ups, one of the absolute best would have to be Irem's R-Type. There were a number of excellent conversions, especially on the Commodore 64 and TurboGrafx 16, but even the Sega Master System cranked out an excellent version. The designers of the game took inspiration from the Alien franchise and the arcade shooter Gradius, but flipped it on its side. Basically, you shoot everything that moves while having to deal with huge screen-filled bosses and acquiring power-ups from a device called the Force. As I mentioned, this version is spectacular with the same crushingly difficult but a very addictive gameplay as found in the arcade game. The graphics are excellent with highly detailed but occasionally flickering sprites and smooth animation, and the nice tight controls from the arcade game have been transferred over. The sound and music is also superb, especially for an 8-bit machine. This is, without a doubt, one of the best shooters on the system. Another one of my favorite games for the system and in general is the original version of Wonder Boy. Yes, I know, another arcade conversion Pac-Man, but these are the types of games that I like, and when something is very close to being arcade accurate, especially back in 1987, it leaves a lasting impression on me. Now of course we had Adventure Island for the NES, which is basically the same game, but instead of Wonder Boy as the title character, we had Master Higgins. The plot is pure 1980s nostalgia with you taking on the role of Wonder Boy, who is a caveman-like boy and is armed with a stone hatchet. You are attempting to rescue your green-haired girlfriend Tina, who has been captured by the Dark King. There are various power-ups in the game, such as a skateboard which will rush you through levels, and protection by an angel which allows you to destroy enemies by simply running into them. Similar to the arcade game Gauntlet, your energy bar will constantly go down, and the only way to keep it replenished is to collect the various food throughout the levels. The Master System version is excellent, much more so than Adventure Island on the NES. The levels are bright and vibrant, making good use of the Master System's palette. Similar to other classic games from the 1980s, the music is still burned in my brain and it always brings a smile to my face whenever I hear it. The gameplay is very similar to the arcade original, making this one of the best home releases of Wonder Boy. Now I'm sure I'm going to catch some flack for this, but personally I really loved the game Rocky. Sure, it's more style over substance, but as a 14-year-old boy playing not only with this but other things as well, this game really stood out. We did have a ColecoVision game entitled Rocky Super Action Boxing, which utilized a Super Action controller, but it was based primarily around the movie Rocky III, and your only opponent was Clubber Lang. The graphics were really good though, especially the title screen. The Master System game is based around the entire Rocky movie franchise, in which you have to face off against the same opponents that the Italian Stallion had to endure, including Apollo Creed, Clubber Lang, and the Soviet killer of the American language, Ivan Drago. In between fights, you'll have to do a series of minigames in which you level up Rocky, and you will need to do this because the game gets extremely difficult, especially when you get to Drago. The graphics are absolutely phenomenal with large detailed sprites, especially in the minigames. The animation is fairly smooth, and while we don't get the Rocky theme song, the music isn't too bad and the sound effects are typical of a standard boxing game. A lot of people complain about the controls, and yes, it does get repetitive, so you may just have to use a turbo controller instead. In my opinion, this game is worth a look even if it is just for the graphics. One of the best side-scrolling adventures on the Master System is Psycho Fox. The gameplay is very similar to Mario and Sonic, in which you have to defeat all the enemies while utilizing a magical Shinto stick, allowing you to transform into other characters such as a tiger, monkey, or hippopotamus, with each one having their own special abilities. You do have the ability to punch enemies and glide over water, provided you are going fast enough. Also similar to Mario are warp zones, which definitely helps when attempting to reach the end of the game. You have to be careful though, because in later levels, the warp zones can result in you going backwards instead of forwards. The graphics are excellent with smooth scrolling and nicely detailed sprites and animation. The backgrounds are reminiscent of the early levels of Super Mario, but only a bit more colorful. The audio was pretty good, and the controls are easy to learn but tough to master. You have a punch button and a jump button, and due to the speed of the game, you best be on your toes. This is another classic for Sega's 8-bit wonder. Another classic game for the Master System is Asterix. This was based on the French comic of the same name, and the graphics are spectacular. You take on the role of Asterix and Obelix as you attempt to rescue Gedalix the Druid and Obelix's pet dog, Dogmatix. The evil Romans have kidnapped them, so it's up to you to save the day. This is a platform game that is spread across a number of unique levels, each one with the hidden secrets and various bosses that need to be defeated. You can choose to play as either Asterix or Obelix, making for a unique gaming experience. The controls are very simple, with you having a punch attack and another for jumping. You also have a jumping attack for taking care of the enemies. You have to locate the key in each level, which will open a door or gate to proceed. There are a number of power-ups, including explosives, temporary platforms, fire, and more. There are 8 levels in total, with bonus rounds included, and as I mentioned, various secrets to unlock. The audio was very good, especially the catchy music. The controls are nice and tight, and this is definitely an underrated title. If you love platformers, you should definitely give this a whirl. Another one of my favorite games for the system, which also appeared on the Sega Genesis, is Spider-Man vs. the Kingpin. In this title, you take on the role of everyone's least favorite webhead and, according to J. Jonah Jameson, public enemy number 1. The Kingpin has planted a number of bombs all across New York City and is planning on framing Spider-Man for the evil deed. Not only do you play as Spider-Man, webbing up various enemies, but you also have to use Peter Parker's ability to take photographs and use the money to buy extra web fluid. You have to face off against a number of Spidey's arch enemies, such as Dr. Octopus, Electro, and Venom. There are 6 levels in the game, with a boss at the end of each one. The final battle takes place against the Kingpin, and there are 2 different endings available. The graphics, while not much by today's standards, are really good, with smoothly animated characters and nice pixel art, but honestly, they feel a bit on the small side. The cutscenes work well and makes you feel like you are reading an actual comic book. For the first time on the SMS, the music and sound effects approach queef-worthiness, but they aren't quite that bad. The controls are good, with you being able to cling to walls, punch, kick, and swing on your web. It's a fun little game, especially if you enjoy retro superhero video games. Another Master System game that doesn't get a whole lot of love is Zillion. This is a space adventure platform game and was produced as a tie-in for the Zillion anime series in 1987. The story is pretty straightforward, with you being a member of the White Knights, which is a peacekeeping organization within the planetary system. Your goal is to attempt a takeover planned by the Norsa Empire. The objective of the game is to search the huge fortress room by room, looking for 5 floppy disks which contain their evil plans. The controls are easy enough, with you having a jump button and a fire button for utilizing your laser gun, the Zillion. By the way, the model for the Zillion was a design model for the Master System's phaser light gun. The further into the game you get, the stronger the gun becomes. Your character can also crawl, which you will definitely need to avoid traps and lasers. Throughout the base are a number of capsules that contain key codes and power-ups. You need to use these key codes to unlock rooms, but also to deactivate traps. And if you just can't take it anymore, you can also use them to commit suicide. You can also play as Apple or Champ, each one with their own unique abilities. The graphics are pretty good, but this was an early Master System release. The music is good as well, but for the most part remains the same throughout the whole game. The game controls great, showing off its fluid animation. It's a fantastic little gem, and one of the more unique titles on the Master System. Another fantastic shooter for the Master System is Power Strike. This is a balls-to-the-wall vertical shooter, and it's a lot of fun to play. The graphics are fantastic, with a number of enemies on screen and a unique gameplay experience. Similar to other shooters, there are a number of weapons in the game, but here's the kicker. Depending on which weapons you are using, the enemy waves will change, making it impossible to memorize your way through the game. With all those enemies on screen, occasionally you will get some slowdown, but due to the difficulty, this may not be a bad thing. You have to kill wave upon wave of enemies, as well as the obligatory boss battles. There are 6 levels in total, plus a secret hidden area for you to discover. The controls are fantastic and are extremely responsive. Another game I really enjoyed was The Lucky Dime Caper, starring Donald Duck. This is a platform game starring everyone's favorite marble-mouthed duck as you set out across 7 levels in an attempt to rescue the Lucky Dimes. These Lucky Dimes were given to Donald's nephews, Huey, Louie, and Dewey, by Scrooge McDuck, but upon doing so, the 3 nephews and their newfound riches were taken by the evil Magica Despel. The controls are pretty straightforward, with you having an attack button and a jump button. Your weapon of choice is a hammer or frisbee, which you can obviously throw. There is no health bar, but you are allowed 2 hits. The first hit will make you drop whichever weapon you are using, and upon the second hit, when you are weaponless, you will die. There are a few different power-ups and items that will appear after defeating certain enemies. These include extra men, keys for locked doors, and stars. By grabbing the stars, it will upgrade your weapon, allowing you to swing faster or hit harder. Thankfully, the game is pretty easy, but you also have unlimited continues. The graphics are really good, with Donald sporting his blue sailor suit and forgetting to put on his pants. The animation is very nice, and it really captures the spirit of a Disney cartoon. The stages are also varied and thankfully don't look very similar. You also have to fight a boss at the end of each level. The audio was pretty good, but nothing to write home about. The controls, however, are excellent, with smooth control over Donald. Out of all the Disney games on the Master System, this one would have to be my favorite. When talking about some of the worst games on the system, we might as well start with the 2-for-1 special, and of course we're talking about Back to the Future 2 and Back to the Future 3. If these games were farts, they would be certified as Dutch ovens. Let's start with Part 3 first. I had this game on the Amiga, and apparently I was young, dumb, and full of gum because I enjoyed it for what it was. Going back and trying to play the Master System port was just an awful experience. To be fair, the graphics are good for an 8-bit system, but the controls are stiffer than me on prom night. The difficulty of the game is crushingly brutal. There are only 3 stages in total, with the first level seeing you take on the role of Doc Brown as you avoid the obstacles and attempt to save Clara from going over the ridge. The second level sees you take control of Marty, in which you have to throw pies at Buford Mad Dog Cannon, and the third level takes place on top of a train. There are some cool cutscenes in between each level which are drawn very well. I always found it odd that in the Amiga version, Marty McFly's face is covered up with a bandana, whereas all the other versions he is not. The Amiga version in particular had a great rendition of Ghost Riders in the Sky playing during the first level, but the audio in the Master System version is not very good, although it does belt out a decent rendition of the Back to the Future theme. If you thought the game based on the third movie was bad, be sure and check out Back to the Future Part 2. This game is separated into 5 different minigames with some of the most annoying controls I've ever seen. The first level sees Marty riding a hoverboard, avoiding oncoming vehicles while trying to stay away from Griff and his gang of misfits. You can punch enemies and jump over obstacles, which is essentially pointless because the collision detection is so bad. You do have an energy bar and there are power-ups, but overall it's just an exercise in futility. The second level is a puzzle game in which you take control of Jennifer, guiding her out of her house. The third level is a side-scrolling beat-em-up in which Marty returns to 1985, fighting off Biff's guards as you wander through Hill Valley. The fourth level is a sliding puzzle game, which I must admit was kind of cool. And then the fifth level, you go back to 1955, but it plays identical to the first level. The graphics are laughably bad, and the audio is horrendous. Similar to Back to the Future 3, the controls are very stiff and unresponsive. Another game that was a chore to play through is Alf. This was based on the TV show of the same name in which you play as the alien life form, or Alf for short. Alf has crash landed on Earth, and the goal of the game is to collect the scattered pieces of his spaceship and return to his home planet. The game takes place across 5 levels and is widely considered one of the worst Master System games ever released. I wouldn't go that far, but it's not very enjoyable, that's for sure. The graphics were drawn on an Amiga and then converted to the Master System, which makes everything look a bit odd. This is another one-hit wonder type of game since there was no energy bar. Considering this is one of the worst Master System games, the audio was definitely queef-worthy. As far as the controls, you basically are able to jump, duck, open doors, and that's really about it. You can collect various items such as lanterns that let you see in the dark, fuel, and keys to unlock doors. You can even pick up a salami to slay the bats that are found in the basement. To make matters worse, the collision detection is terrible. Would I recommend this game? Absolutely not. Fighter was always a game I enjoyed in the arcades and on the Sega Genesis, but the Master System version is pathetic. Once you take away the attraction of the digitized graphics and all the voices, what you are left with is a basic fighter that really isn't that much fun to play. The lovely, bodacious, buff sprites from the arcade game have been redrawn as pixel art and are now microscopic in size. They look like they just stepped off the set of Snow White. There is basically no music in the game and the sound effects are laughably bad, with bloops and bleeps aplenty, sounding as if they were produced on an Atari 2600. The controls are decent, but the collision detection is not good. As I mentioned, I love the arcade game, but this one, not so much. Far be it from me to rag on any wrestling games, especially ones that feature the Nature Boy, Ric Flair, but WWF Steel Cage Challenge is a nightmare. This game was released by the fantastic developer LJN, with a roster of 10 wrestlers including illustrious superstars such as Papa Shango, Tatanka, IRS, and the immoral Hulk Hogan. It doesn't matter who you play as though, because each wrestler has the same moveset with no finishing moves. You do have body slams, clotheslines, and drop kicks, plus your typical stomps and punches. The graphics are easily identifiable. The animation is something Terrence and Phillip would be proud of. The audio was pretty good, with versions of the wrestler's theme song playing on the character select screen. There are a couple of other game modes, including Tag Team and the aforementioned Steel Cage match. Ever since the original leaderboard was released on the Commodore 64, I've loved playing golf games. One golf game that I didn't love playing was Great Golf. This is your basic run-of-the-mill golf game, but there is only one course available with 18 holes. 4 players can play by taking turns, but honestly, who has the time? After you hit the ball by selecting your club and power meter, you wait, and wait, and wait some more for the screen to refresh for you to do it all over again. I'm not kidding. It takes about 10 seconds between the time the ball lands until it's time to hit the ball again. Graphically, it's only average, and I suppose you could play this game at 300% speed. Perhaps then it would be playable. When it comes to discussing the worst games on the system, you knew at some point the name Tiertex would rear its ugly head. The Flintstones is a port of the horrible home computer versions, although this time the graphics are a bit better, except maybe for the Amiga version. Speaking of the Amiga version, any game where Fred is allowed to foul, I simply cannot condone.
Over the line!
However, we did get some cool monkey pin setters in this version. We do get an opening cutscene as well as better music, but that's really about it. The story revolves around Fred wanting to go bowling, which is something I can relate to. However, he has to paint the walls of the house before the bowling alley closes while preventing Pebbles from eating any tasty lead-filled paint. This is just as bad as it sounds. The second level sees you finally get to the bowling alley where you play a basic game of 10 pins with the objective of beating Barney in the game. If you do, it's on to the third and final level in which you have to rescue Pebbles. The graphics are decent and, as I mentioned, not quite as detailed as in certain home computer versions, especially the Amiga. The music plays a decent rendition of the Flintstones theme, but after 35.6 seconds it does get a bit annoying. Control-wise, it's terrible, and overall it's not very fun to play. And yes, that even includes the bowling game, which plays like a precursor to Elf Bowling. There you have it, everybody. The best and the worst games of the Sega Master System. There are lots more good games and bad games to cover, so if you would like to see more, let me know in the comments down below. If you like this video, be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Also, if you would like to support me on Patreon, please click the link below. If you would like to contribute but not sign up for my Patreon, you can always click the donate button up above. Thanks everyone for watching.